Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We are here to demystify Microsoft 365 E7, the Frontier Worker Suite. My name is Brian Anderson. I'm responsible for enterprise architecture and strategy at Emergent Software.
And I'm Corey Stillman. I'm the Modern Work and Security Director here at Emergent Software.
And we will be talking through a couple things today. Quick commercial before we get started for those of you that may be a little bit less familiar with Emergent Software. We are a Microsoft-focused consultancy working across software development, cloud platforms, data and analytics, and AI on the Microsoft stack. We're also a Microsoft Direct CSP, so talk a little bit more about that at the end and some of the solutions we offer, but jumping right in, here's what we're going to cover today over the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to talk through what Microsoft 365 is or E7 is and isn't. We're going to do a deep dive on a few of the incremental features that E7 includes above the E3 and E5 suites you may already be familiar with. We're going to offer a few decision and adoption frameworks to help you think about the ROI and the value of upgrading and choose the suite that may be right for specific groups of users at your organization. And we'll end by covering off on a few of the introductory promos that Microsoft has launched E7 with to really make it attractive for organizations to try it out. If you're not able to join for the full 45 minutes, no worries, this is recorded. We'd love to have you stick around, and we'd also love to invite you to drop comments, questions in the chat. Corey will be monitoring that, and we'll try to take questions either as they come in or at the very least at the end or as a fast follow. So please encourage participation via the chat window. Thank you. Corey, do you want to take us through?
You bet. So thanks, Brian. And you know, the past couple of years has certainly been an exciting time as AI has really changed the way that we do work. And part of that change is the agents are becoming a core building block to our day-to-day work, right? Handling repeatable tasks, coordinating workflows for us, and scaling across teams. So people can focus more on higher value decisions and tasks. And as agents are being introduced to us, you know, Microsoft is now projecting, 1.3 billion agents will be in use by the year 2028. And so really that is signaling a structural change in how we work and how work gets done. And so as we look at that, 82% of the organizations intend to integrate agents within the next 1 to 3 years, and 40% of organizations plan to do it this year alone. So as we think about the way an organization is using these agents, the question really becomes, is your organization ready? And as you need more visibility into what agents are existing inside your organizations, what they're doing, what data they're accessing, we want to make sure that you as IT and as an organization have the tools necessary to really do this in a safe way. And so that is where Microsoft has introduced the latest in its productivity suite, and they're calling it the Frontier Suite, the Microsoft 365 E7. So it's E7 because it's really the language of frontier transformation is used to describe that shift as AI becomes a real operating capability in a set, and not just a set of pilots, right? So it's Microsoft's next generation bundle. It's for organizations ready to use ready to move from experimenting with AI into operationalizing it and securing it. And so as we look at kind of the Microsoft 365 E7 suite, we really start to look at the tools that have been added and integrated within it. And so you have your Microsoft E5 as well as the Entra suite. So that component makes up the productivity suite for human-led, agent-operated enterprises. You start to introduce Copilot and bring in a Copilot license for your users, as well as the ability for agents and built-in governance. And the governance piece is the Agent 365 piece, allowing organizations not only to take full advantage of the components of secure productivity work that you get with the E5 suite and all the security features that you have, as well as adding Copilot, which many organizations are rolling out to their users today, you're layering in that Agent 365 component that is really giving you that ability to take action and secure your operation at scale. And all of this is built upon Microsoft's Work IQ. And Work IQ is kind of that intelligence layer that is actually looking at the data inside your organization. It's pulling signals from your emails, your meetings, chats, files, and day-to-day processes. And it also can understand more than just questions that you're asking it. It understands the priorities you have, relationships you have within your organization. So responses are becoming a lot more valuable. Prior to Work IQ, you may have asked questions and it was giving generalized responses on information you supplied and information that you had. After Work IQ, Copilot starts to understand those relationships and roles that you have and priorities. So it can help you prioritize your day. It can look at meetings and help you line up agenda items and those types of tasks, really making it very valuable. As we look at kind of the Frontier suite and its components today, we start to break this down. And it's branded, again, as the Frontier suite because it is AI agents are going to behave like digital workers inside your organization. So they, much like your human employees, they need identity, they need permissions, policies, monitoring, compliance. All of that comes together with the E7 bundle where we mentioned combining kind of a product of 4 individual sets of products. So you have your E5 traditional license, which most organizations are familiar with. As you transition from E3 to E5, you get the additional security features in Purview. You get the additional Entra ID P2 and some of the compliance and regulation controls that provides you. You add in Entra Suite, which now takes that identity across access management, and Brian's going to talk a lot more about that aspect here in a few minutes, and layer that with Copilot licenses that many organizations are already buying today for your employees so that they can work more intelligently, and not only work intelligently, but design agents for your organization. As you roll out Copilot licenses, you also know that gives the ability for your employees to use Copilot Studio. Agent 365 and kind of a combination of DPA or DPI for AI gives you that ability to kind of control who can build agents and what agents can be built within your organization. It also gives you that ability to look and see what those things can do across your organization, what agents are built, what they're accessing, and maybe who they're shared with. And it also gives you the ability as third-party agents are released or available in the marketplace for you as an IT to block those agents and control what is acceptable and not acceptable inside your organization. So as you kind of look at that top line there, and we're really looking at the full package, if you were to price each one of these individually, you're pricing this at around $117, right? And so as you look at the rollout price, this takes all of that and bundles all of these features together for that one consolidated price. And Brian will talk really about that decision-making point and where it makes sense and how your organization should transform into that. What I want to do next is kind of start to look at some of these incremental features that are making up the E7 license, right? And I'm going to start with Copilot. Many of us are familiar with Copilot today. So we're all familiar with it, the ability that it's an AI assistant embedded directly into Microsoft 365. It works alongside you in applications like Outlook, Teams, Excel, PowerPoint, and those type of things, helping you draft content, summarize meeting notes, analyze data, giving you kind of the real action using your own data and giving you insights that maybe you wouldn't have looked at previously. In the last 45 days, Copilot has taken additional steps and continues to evolve. I would love to sit here and tell you that, what we as a organization or as consultants and your trusted partner can help you align with everything that Copilot is doing and able to do, but it is changing so quickly that we too are learning these tools right alongside with you. And I think as the industry, we're all learning together. And really, so as we start to take these components and learn together, it's very valuable to understand that this product, like the E7, is critical for organizations to have that control, have that insight, and have that view. So as we look kind of at Copilot and where additional things are, I want to talk about Copilot embedded directly into these apps. In your apps now, if you have a Microsoft 365 license, you have the ability to edit directly in Copilot. At one time, Microsoft was calling this agent mode within the applications. Now they call it edit with Copilot. You have the ability to also plan with Copilot or just chat. So those are features that you have in a drop-down menu inside these applications that let you either edit, so Copilot can make changes real time, manipulate your data, help analyze things, great for use in Excel, PowerPoint, Word to help you kind of draft content or modify your documentation. You can plan it where you can see what changes maybe it would suggest, but not actually implement those. Or you can just have a chat, much like you would with the web-based chat function where you can ask questions to help provide you context, insight, etc. But all of that is the ability also inside applications now to switch models. So you can switch models between Opus or your traditional models, and more models become available as the product evolves. So really, as we kind of look at the next component of these core apps, there's also pre-built agents. And these pre-built agents produced by Microsoft kind of help employees move ideas to the finished artifacts directly from Word, Excel, PowerPoint, SharePoint. For example, if you would go out to your agent mode and look at all agents, you'll find that there's a Word agent for Microsoft Copilot that provides a natural way of creating a document outside of Word. So you don't even need to open up Word now. You can launch the Word agent, just describe what you need, like I need help drafting a proposal, writing a report, a newsletter, etc. And that will all be done inside this Word agent, helping you kind of back and forth through a native conversation, draft this content, and then the finished product will be a Word document that you can then open and make an adjustment inside Microsoft Word. Same with the Excel agent, again, giving you that more natural language way of creating a workbook, saying, I need a budget tracker, I need a project plan, I need a financial model, and starting to put together the components in the foundation that you can then transfer into the products. We're all familiar, and if you haven't utilized the agents such as Researcher, or Analyst Agent, I recommend that you take a look at those. Those tools help collaborate and provide additional ways to look at some of your documents or some of your information. And really, as we look at Copilot and understanding, what it means when you license a user, is Microsoft's making agent building accessible to everyone. It's not just for developers, right? So Agent Builder, which is directly right within Microsoft 365 Copilot, you can describe using simple task-focused agents and wording of what you're looking to do. Like, I need help drafting, I need help designing this or doing this task on a daily basis. At the same time, you have the ability to control or go into what is considered to be a more advanced agent, and those are designed within Copilot Studio. And Copilot Studio, as agents are produced there and shared across your organization, both with licensed and unlicensed users through credit packs or credits, it's important that IT can stay in control. And really, that's the importance of understanding this E7 model, is that we want to maintain control as we're deploying these agents. So Copilot agents, do represent that shift from AI as a helper to AI as a digital teammate. You'll understand that new products like Microsoft Cowork came out that takes action on what you've asked it to do. rather than just providing insight or providing next steps or suggestions, it actually takes and turns it into real life actions. You have the ability to create personalized agents, and those agents can help you with your task. And then you can get into the Copilot advanced agents, where they're the foundation of work. You're starting to move beyond that, hey, day-to-day assistance for you as an employee, and you're now, maturing and using those agents across teams, helping teams do tasks, helping inject itself into workflows, really help design the next steps of what's important for your business. So as you look at kind of that first component, right? So as you take your E5 model, or even if you were an E3 model and you're layering and all employees are already integrated with Copilot today, this is now bundling those two products together in E7. So the first component that we've added in the E5 to E7 transition, or even E3 to E7 transition, is Copilot embedded directly in that license. Brian's going to talk about the next two core features, which really start to give that security and posturing that IT and organizations want to understand, to make sure that they know what data and what information is being shared inside their organization. So Brian?
Thanks, Corey. So as Corey just talked about, we're starting to see the license model shift towards an ecosystem where organizations who are looking to become frontier firms are going to start to see non-human workers enter the workforce. And we call those workers agents. And on the previous slide, we saw a quick little demo animation, if you will, of Erica, a member of our sales organization, who's looking to get a little help from her non-human agent with sales prospecting. But that's probably not the only use case that your organization is going to think about. And we imagine that many orgs will see hundreds of agents, if not thousands, over the next several years, back to Corey's 1.3 billion agents within the industry by 2028. So one of the first things that Microsoft is thinking about here is, how do I get my arms around where all those agents are, what they're doing, what types of data they have access to, what types of rights they have access to, who's using them, and how they're being shared. And so they've introduced a product that will become GA with E7 on May 1st called Agent 365. And this is really debuted as the control plane for agents, providing observability, governance, and security control planes for this ecosystem of agents. So we'll talk through some of the bullet points on this slide in a bit more detail over the next couple of minutes. But first, I want to show you guys a couple of quick screenshots or demos. And for organizations who maybe more of the technical audience that might be on the call today, who have access to Microsoft 365 Admin Center, this feature is in preview now, as long as your tenant has opted into preview features, excuse me. And so you should be able to go to admin.microsoft.com and see the Agent 365 preview. Again, this will shift over the next couple of weeks as Agent 365 becomes GA. But we'll show you a couple of views. And the first thing we're seeing here is the all agents view of an organization with over 21,000 agents deployed worldwide, many of which are first party for Microsoft, but many of which are not. And a key feature of Agent 365 is the ability to manage and see and govern third-party agents as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Zooming in on one of those agents, we have a look at the permissions tab on a support agent that an organization has created, and we're able to control and see some of the privilege levels and permissions that have been assigned to it. We've seen who has accepted those permissions and provided auditing to it. And a couple more tabs that show activity, security and compliance, and some tools access that that agent may have. And so this is what it will look like when it becomes GA. You'll start to see the ability to zoom in on individual agents and see what they're up to or able to get up to in much the same way you would a human worker, as we shift from information and knowledge retrieval into agents that actually take action. And then finally, we have a security plane here where we're starting to look at the risk levels and activities of these agents in the same way that we look at the activities and risks levels of human workers. Things like data exfiltration, oversharing, unethical usage. Those types of things are not exclusively limited to human behavior, and you can see agents start to do things that maybe you prefer they don't as well. And so thinking about DLP, thinking about data security boundaries, and thinking about ways to see all that and audit that activity and get kind of a traceability layer to your agent's activity is going to become important as the agentic workforce starts to become common. So that's what Agent 365 looks like. Just again, a couple of quick views. In terms of how it's licensed, kind of key takeaway here is that Agent 365, whether you purchase it a la carte or whether you take it as part of an E7 license, is licensed per human user, not per agent. And that licensed user will have Agent 365 access and governance coverage for any number of agents that are quote unquote acting on behalf of the user. You'll start to see this OBO terminology throughout Microsoft's documentation and marketing material when they talk about how this license works. The key thing to remember here is that it's a control plane. It's not an AI execution or consumption license. So your Agent 365 license doesn't include the message packs within Copilot Studio, your Azure AI Foundry licensing or consumption, or the tokens for the models themselves, or that Copilot user experience that Corey talked about. That is separate from the Agent 365 piece. But what it does provide is visibility into agent activity and actions. It can integrate with Defender for security signaling and Purview for compliance auditing and DLP and policy enforcement. And it, of course, works with Entra, which we'll talk a lot more about over the next few slides when we start to get into the Entra suite. A quick decision framework on how to think about Agent 365 is this is the license for users who build, sponsor, or manage agents, or who are regularly interacting with agents that take actions, or agents that rely on access to internal data in your organization. It's not required for basic Copilot usage or people who are just using the Copilot chat or the web tab experience for summarizing emails or doing research or just kind of as an enhanced Google or enhanced Bing, if you will. And so read-only or traditional M365 users may not need an Agent 365 license out of the gate. And so something key to think about here is how Microsoft is advertising this is through a phased rollout approach. And this is both for E7 and the Agent 365 user in particular. If your organization is just getting started with AI and it's just starting to experiment with Copilot and agents, it might be a good idea to think about who the power users, the IT security and governance leaders, maybe some early adopter business people who are passionate about AI, and think about giving them an Agent 365 or an E7 license. And then as you start to see these agents get published out into your organization and you start to see Copilot use at scale and personal agents and some of those advanced Power Automate and other automation features scale and integrate with your agents or your organization's data, that's when we start to see E7 become compelling at scale. But it is not Microsoft's vision nor Emergent Software's recommendation that the organization who's maybe just getting started with AI think about E7 out of the gate. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is at the end here. We offer a more comprehensive decision framework. I did mention earlier, Agent 365 provides observability and governance to third-party agents. If you head out to Microsoft's website, I'll provide a URL here on the next slide to that, you'll see a lot of different organizations such as Adobe, Cognition, ServiceNow, Workday. There's integrations with third-party agents beyond just the ones listed here in the middle. But the idea here is that whether you're using Microsoft built-in agents, whether you're building your own, or whether you're leveraging some of the growing ecosystem of partners, Agent 365 will provide organizational visibility, governance, and security for those agents and who can use them and what they can do. A roadmap item to just highlight there, zooming in just a touch deeper, is the agent registry sync feature that's going to become GA later this summer. We'll be previewing with the release of E7 here in May. And the idea here, if you kind of squint at the screenshot on the right, is that it's going to automatically sync agents that are discovered within your organization into the Agent 365 registry. So you'll start to see those agents, whether they're built on Amazon Bedrock, whether they're the partners I mentioned earlier, or whether they're Microsoft native agents or ones that your organization builds, you'll start to see those appear within the Agent 365 registry automatically. So we've started to got visibility to all these agents that our organization has built. We've talked about some of the powerful things that you can do with them and take action on behalf of a user. How do you secure all that? And that's what EntreSuite and the inclusion within the E7 license is all about. EntreSuite, just to explain what it is it's Microsoft's vision for zero trust access for your workforce. So it's blending together several different features of Entra that have always been incremental to E3 and E5 users, but that are starting to become very important for those organizations that are building these agents and having them take action. And the reason why, to talk about really what the ethos behind why this is, I kind of go back to thinking about E3 and E5 and how they were designed for a human-first workforce or human-only workforce. And you think about what that means, AI is great at retrieving information when you have a human prompting it. It's typically following, like if you're using Copilot Chat or Copilot Web Tap, for example, it's following the permissions of the user who is logged in. It's being initiated from the device or the location that user sits at. And so the risk profile really aligns with the traditional knowledge worker when you're just using Copilot for assistance. But when you're using agents are actually initiating work, and the work may or may not occur with humans being in the loop or involved in real time or out of band. Those agents can operate continuously, even in the middle of the night. They can operate across systems and workflows. And because of that, they are using delegated authority rather than piggybacking on the permissions and user accounts of or devices of the user who maybe that Copilot assisted worker is working through on the left. And that paradigm requires explicit ownership, identity, visibility, traceability, and governance for the agent itself, in no different than if that was a second human employee. And so I'll walk through a scenario of how this works. We imagine a project manager using an AI agent to coordinate new hire onboarding, right? So if you imagine that scenario for a moment, as Corey talked about, these tools such as Copilot Studio are meant for people who are not necessarily developers. They're meant for anybody to build agents. So that project manager maybe got a little bit of background in Copilot Studio, decided to try and build an agent that can create accounts, assign access, and start to onboard these new hires to their project. And that agent is first registered with an identity rather than shared credentials. And it will start to appear in Agent 365, as well as in Entra, where Entra will establish a non-human identity tied to the owner, so tied to that project manager, and that agent will have some permissions scope to it. So that permissions may include access to the HRIS, SharePoint, team sites, maybe some work files related to the project. And those permissions are delegated rather than inherited from the project manager. And then that access will be time-bound and role-specific. So we're starting to apply least privilege approval workflows and access expirations for the duration of the project or the duration of the onboarded task. And then that agent is going to run overnight in this example. So there's no device, there's no VPN, there's no active user session that the project manager is got a Copilot window open or something like that. Rather, it's happening automatically in the background, and that actions are spanning across multiple systems. So the identity of that agent is going to start to need some identity and some policy tied to that identity rather than the network location. And it will be forced through that EntreSuite zero trust principle set. As we move on, that agent wraps up. But every action that it takes, the security and governance team in our organization can see what that agent did and make sure that if something got out of whack, that those risk signals are surfaced up and that the actions are logged and can be restricted or paused in real time. And we can also make sure that those access permissions are revoked and that nothing stands out there beyond the life cycle of this onboarding exercise. And so kind of the key points here is that As an agent starts to behave like a digital employee, identity becomes more important than device or network level controls. And we need to start to shift to a continuous security model that monitors that identity throughout the life of an agent's work. So thinking about a risk framework here, this is a system view that we put together to try to map how Entra and Agent 365 and some of the existing features that you might be familiar with from the E5 world work when we have this new paradigm of AI agents working together in our organization. So we have Entra Internet Access, creating a couple of guardrails around prompt risking and unapproved tool usage. We have Entra Suite managing that identity, as I just talked about, and we start to get some scoped authority and traceability of what those agents are doing via Purview and Defender. And then Agent 365 is kind of that control plane that ties it all together. I'll hand it back to Corey in just a moment here to talk through some of the deeper level promotional offers and intro pricing, but I did want to talk through a decision framework here. And really what I would say in summary between Copilot, Agent 365, Entra Suite, it's meant for the agentic organization, those organizations that are trying to become that frontier firm of human and non-human workers kind of working together in concert, people who are deploying agents who act for organizations who are considering that a core part of their strategy, people who are scaling Copilot past initial experimentation and focus groups, but out to the entire workforce and start to tie KPIs and expectations to that, and who are starting to need governance, identity enforcement as the agents that they build work across the different systems and data that they consider proprietary. On the other end of the spectrum, E3 still has a great place within the organization too for those cost-sensitive user populations that aren't using Copilot or agents and who are just knowledge workers with kind of those regular everyday productivity needs. And then E5 in the middle starts to really step up the security for those regulated industries, the security conscious organizations, and those advanced kind of endpoint and identity protection scenarios that E5 introduces. In truth, the right blend is not necessarily a one size fits all for each organization, but rather a blend of these licenses. And as I talked about in my phased rollout recommendation for Agent 365, there's a great case to be made for applying broadly the security and compliance feature sets of E5, including that DLP layer, advanced threat protection with Defender, some of the compliance features across your M365 data estate with Purview and the insider risk management and e-discovery features that it offers, but then layering on E7 for those agent builders and kind of the agentic control tower workers, if you want to think about the airport analogy, and then thinking about those non-human actors and the additional identity-based governance and enforcement that they will need. So I'll hand it back to Corey, and Corey will talk through some of the promo offers and intro pricing that Microsoft is making available with the onset of E7.
Yeah, so as Brian mentioned, finding the right fit for your organization and where E7 comes in is going to be vital and important, just as organizations transitioned from E3 to E5 during that phase and understanding where it made sense and what made sense. Again, the same kind of thing comes into play here. And as we presented earlier in the presentation, all of this is available as kind of piecemeal, right? You have your E5 that you can buy standalone, your Agent 365, which you can buy standalone, Copilot, and certainly Entra Suite. And looking at that, if you were starting to do that, again, as I mentioned, kind of as you bundled those together, it comes to that list price of 117. And so as we look at a couple of the promos that are out here, to kind of incentivize this as we look at the release on Friday, is there's the E7 for 10 plus seats where Microsoft's going to offer 10% off promo. And that 10% off promo will, help get the pricing down to that, 89.10 range per user. And we have a slide here in a second that'll talk about that. But they also have it for organizations that are maybe looking to take on 100 plus seats. Both of these promos, where you get a 15% promo and a price of $84.15, right? List price. Both of these promos are available through the end of the calendar year, so available through December 31st. They are available for your 1 year commit, and it can be annual billing or it can be monthly billing. So you can get a discount on both of these. Obviously, the prices that I'm rattling off here would be that annual commit, annual pricing. And as we kind of look at this broken down a little bit, I have a couple slides to kind of break this down. The first for that organization that may just be in that 10 to 99 users, right? If you were looking at just your E5 plus Copilot licenses today, and knowing that that price would be around $87 and 90 once we get to July 1st, and as Microsoft announced, a 10% increase on pricing coming at July 1st at Microsoft's fiscal year turn. That certainly is an appealing option for you to look at the E7. Just alone there would save you 90 cents a user, right? Come July 1st. As you look at, if you were interested, and Brian laid out greatly what Agent 365 does, is Agent 365 kind of adds that layer of observation. And so there, if you were bundling or buying those a la carte, you're at 105. So it starts to really be a price break point, and as the next slide kind of alludes to, is that 15% break is, again, looking at that price point, even at the E5 plus Copilot today, if you were buying those two products standalone, you can move into the E7 and all of the features we talked about today, the Entra Suite, the Agent 365, as well as your Copilot license bundled for cheaper than what you're purchasing those stacks today. So really, Microsoft has introduced these promos. Again, they run, these would be 1 year models. They run through December 31st as of right now, and they will take effect on Friday when the E7 product becomes available for purchase. As we look at another promo, a lot of organizations have started to look at that 3-year option, right? Locking in their pricing of either E3 or E5 for a 3-year term to kind of help combat maybe some of the price increases that may come out over that 3-year period, right? So if all of a sudden that 57 to 60 becomes, in a couple of years, 65, maybe you want to lock in that pricing and have that set budget. So again, Microsoft has released a promo on the 3-year package for the E7, much like they did for the E3 and E5 bundle. So here again, you can lock in for that $84.15 per user and have that price locked in for the next 3 years. There's also, and I want to mention this as we kind of start to wrap things up today, there are still promos available for Copilot alone. So if your organization isn't ready to deep dive into the E7 yet, but you certainly want to expand your use of Copilot, you want to introduce more and more functionality and features and get your organization kind of transitioning to this agentic workflow and period, there are promos available. Reach out to your account executives or reach out to Emergent, and we would be happy to talk to you about those. But there are certainly promos that are going to run through the end of June that can help your organization kind of scale their Copilot usage. But I would strongly recommend, as you're looking at scaling that usage and your organization is using or building agents to handle some of these workflows, to really consider the 365 E7. Because at that point, as we just showed, the price point and the additional security that Brian mentioned about those agents having identities and having kind of that footprint and ability to work inside your environment, this really is a true full package that kind of safeguards your organization as you transition through this AI period. So, Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. So we'll wrap up here, and we'll have just a couple minutes for questions. As we wrap, again, my name is Brian Anderson. I'm responsible for enterprise architecture here at Emergent Software. Corey on our modern work team, we have our email addresses there. Please reach out. If there's anything you want to dive a little bit deeper, If we're not connected via LinkedIn already, I got the QR codes there. Likely you were watching this webinar on LinkedIn, so feel free to just click through and add us. No wrong way to get a hold of us. We'd love to continue the conversation. On the right, just a couple of, I'll call them accelerator offerings that Emergent Software offers that align to what we've talked about today. I want to highlight two things. First is our AI training focused on Microsoft Copilot Chat and M365 Copilot, ranging from the art and science of writing effective prompts all the way up to some of those more nuanced features, such as those researcher agents and the personal agent creation features of Copilot, and of course, including focus sessions for IT admins and governance leaders and security teams who may be interested in integrating Purview with Copilot. All of that is possible and covered through our AI training program. So if that's interesting as you begin experimenting with Copilot usage and lightweight agent building, that is something we offer here at Emergent. And then the last is our Build an Agent in a Day workshop, focused on agent creation within Copilot Studio, which, as Corey mentioned, is Microsoft's low-code, non-developer focused environment for creating things like HR knowledge retrieval agents or IT ticketing system agents, or even that sales prospecting agent that our example salesperson Erica worked on the demo earlier in this presentation. And the idea here is that we'll have Emergent AI experts lead a collaborative workshop session designed for both IT and non-IT, more business-oriented people alike, to educate and get them comfortable working in Copilot Studio so that you and your organization's power users feel equipped to build agents yourselves. And the cool thing is we'll be there to help you. We have some templates that we've created to make those make it a very easy to digest format, very easy to follow along and customize. And not only will you learn how Copilot Studio works, but you'll have a functioning agent built by the end of that very first day and ready to demo back to your executive team or your HR department or whoever, maybe your sales leader. And you could show how Erica can get some virtual help with sales prospecting that very next day. So Corey, if you can maybe take a peek at the chat, do we have any questions we want to knock out in the last couple of minutes here?
Yeah, real quick, I've got a couple here, and one came in from Dave, and he had asked about, security compliance across AI security, posture management, visibility onto other AI tools, Claude, ChatGPT, etc. Really, the important thing to understand here is Microsoft has the ability to understand and ingest some of those data points. You're certainly going to need Purview Suite. Make sure that your endpoints are registered within Purview. So if you're an E3 license or even Business Premium today, you want to make sure that you add on that Purview Suite so that it gives you that functionality so that you can start to understand what data and what other chat tools your organization may be using or what data is going into that. And so that can be done with that endpoint registration done through Purview and start to ingest that information and certainly expand on it from there. And I know Dan added some comments in the chat as well if you saw those, but it really depends on what you're doing and how those are deployed. But again, the Purview Suite, at least aspect of that, will give you some insight even today. So if you're using Business Premium E3 today, the Purview Suite would give you as an IT admin some of that insight you want to have your endpoints registered. The next great question came in from Sean Becker, who asked, what about organizations smaller than 300, right? That's your typical Business Premium users today. And there are functionality and features. They've got the Business Premium with the Business Copilot Suite, and you can actually take that one step further and embed the whole Purview Suite. I do think, Sean, and I'll certainly get back to you and I can connect with you offline, but I think that for organizations that are still in the Business Premium, you still will have access to some of the function and features within the Agent 365 available to you post Friday. And so I'll get some research there. But from things I've read for smaller organizations, you will still have some insight into some of that information. Certainly this E7 suite, much like your E3, E5, is for those enterprise organizations, 300 seats and larger. And I'm sure Microsoft will not forget to address the small small, medium business market, that 150 to 300 user sweet spot. So we'll get you some answers and get back to you there, but there's certainly promos that we can apply across the board and find the right fit for you.
Awesome. Any other questions? Or I can't see the chat, so I'm relying on you, Corey.
That's what we've got in there. So
awesome. Maybe a quick final comment on Purview. I think you said this already, Corey, but just in case, Purview is available, Purview Suite rather, for E3 organizations. It's included within E5, and it's of course also included within E7. So if you're on one of those E SKUs and you're not on the kind of business premium license tier, those are some additional ways to get access to the Purview features that Corey was just talking about to get visibility into sort of shadow AI usage.
I know we're at time, so we want to wrap up here, but Brian and I certainly appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us today and understand this. If we didn't address your question directly, as Brian mentioned, reach out to us, reach out to your emergent contact, and we'd be happy to sit down with you and get the right answer. And as we near Friday here, just 2 days away from the release of E7. It will be that time, and as Brian mentioned, what was available in preview mode and what features and how they kind of start to roll back some of that information. It's important for you as an organization to understand what's going on inside your tenant, what agents are being built, who's using them, those type of things. So E7 is the real deal. It makes sense. And I do think organizations need to strongly consider it, and you will scale into it, as Brian mentioned. So thank you for your time today, and we look forward to talking to you, Brian.
Thanks, everyone. We'll wrap there.